Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This Week in Privacy, your weekly series where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community. And in this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. Privacy Guides is a non-profit which researches and shares privacy-related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix, where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. But before we dive into this week's show, here's a rundown of how the show will be laid out. First, we'll start by covering site updates. Then we'll discuss the top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. Next, we'll explore some of the trending posts on the Privacy Guides forum. Finally, we'll answer viewer questions, so if you do have a question for us, please leave a comment in the forum thread or the YouTube chat. So to kick things off this week, let's dive straight into the site updates here. And this week, I'm joined by Kevin, our community and news intern. How are you, Kevin?
Oh, I'm doing well. With a new microphone and all that, I hope I sound so much better to our audience, given our past history with noise issues. Anyways, Darren, how are you feeling about news articles we have so far? I heard we have quite a lot.
Yeah, we've kind of got a lot of stories to cover this week. It's kind of been a packed week in terms of news topics, but I think we should probably get started and dive straight into some of the site updates and changelog updates. So,
Oh,
do you
of
want to update
course, of
everyone on that?
course. Oh, yes, yes. And well, for starters, we also have a lot of site updates as well. Not necessarily a good thing, unfortunately. So this week we've released yet another change log on our website, and due to the amazing work done by our volunteers and contributors on the website as well. Thanks to everyone who have contributed. If you want to see specific attributions to each uh, pull request, definitely be sure to check the change log for those contributions. Anyways, I want to start off with one of two removals, unfortunately. DNSO0.eu was a privacy respected DNS resolver hosted in the EU. It has quietly shut down, unfortunately. Even though it launched in 2023, there isn't particularly any formal announcement of it, but given discussion on the forum, we really needed to take some action against this because obviously we cannot recommend a non-function DNS resolver. It has been removed from the website, and you will not see in our recommendations. And in even sadder news, unfortunately, if you have tuned in last week, Molva has announced that they're shutting it down quite soon, within the next week or so. And because of that, we are deciding to remove Molva from our recommendations. If you're looking for alternative search engines to use, either on Molva browser or your Brave and any other recommendations we have, you feel free to use our other recommendations such as Brave Search and DuckDuckGo. On that note, we also like to pivot away from the site updates itself and into video projects that our team has been working quite hard on. And something that we have mentioned before are the threat modeling series that we've been making. And so far, we know that a lot of folks have a lot of potential risks, threats out there, but they don't really know what to do, what's necessarily appropriate. I've seen them firsthand myself, and To be frank, knowing how to properly threat model yourself will do a lot of good work not only for the people trying to help you, but for yourself as well when you're out there trying to make decisions for your privacy and security. And if you're excited to learn more about this, we're planning a 4 episode mini course, spearheaded, of course, by our wonderful Jordan. And once they release, we hope that it will help you a lot with your privacy journey. And finally, I do want to make a very quick note, which we'll explain later, about chat control. We're working very hard to make video content discussing this unfortunate return of chat control, even it has been shut down and reproposed over and over again. And there has been an unfortunate loophole in a compromise proposal, which technically made it mandatory for all service providers in the EU to implement. We remain committed as ever to cover this, so make sure to keep an eye out on the videos that we have in our works, either on TikTok or on YouTube and PeerTube, so that we can spread the word and make sure that everyone in the EU or beyond can use their voices to oppose this indiscriminate mass surveillance proposal. Anyhow, I'd like to shift this towards our first article, and unfortunately, we have two about Firefox. One good, one bad. Jordan, what do you know about this?
Yeah, so this is kind of we've got two stories this week, and Mozilla Firefox is kind of doing a couple of interesting things. We'll start with the good first. Let's start with the good. Mozilla Firefox 145 is here. Buffs up privacy, bloats AI. So this is an article from the Register here. Let me just transition us to the correct screen. Here we go.
Context, the registrar has a very strong voice when writing, and I really like the writers. I feel.
Yeah, they definitely have an interesting. It's both of these articles here from the Register. They covered both of these stories really well, I think. This one's by Liam Proven, and basically, Mozilla has released Firefox 145, and the release notes basically feature quite a lot of different features, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the privacy aspect here, which is like the positive aspect. So to kind of go through that a little bit, the update comes with like a lot of additional features, but the privacy upgrades come with fingerprinting protection. So if you're not aware, browser fingerprinting relies on basically your unique configuration of your computer, and it allows websites to basically track you without having to store data on your browser itself. So that's traditionally done through cookies, and instead it uses your screen resolution, your operating system, hardware specifications. So that's only to name a few. There's a lot of ways that that browser fingerprinting can basically identify you through your system, and Firefox is trying to be ahead of the curve here, and they're implementing browser fingerprinting protections by default into Firefox. So Firefox claims that these protections were carefully considered to avoid breaking websites, and that does mean that these protections are less aggressive than many of our community would like. However, it's still a very positive development because most Firefox users just use the default settings, which, I think this is going to have a huge impact on the effectiveness of fingerprinting on the broader population of the internet. And of course, as usual, if you're looking for the best anti-fingerprinting measures, definitely consider switching to Molvad browser or Tor browser, which have much more comprehensive protections. So just going through some of the things that the fingerprinting changes do, according to Firefox's documentation, random data is introduced to images generated in canvas elements. So basically, this can be used by websites to fingerprint you. So by adding like a random data, it causes the fingerprint to not be the same. The number of simultaneous touches your hardware supports is reported as either 0, 1, or 5. So that can be something that websites use to identify you. The available screen resolution is reported as your screen resolution minus the height of 76 pixels. That's another aspect that we talked about, which is available to websites to track you. The number of processor cores is reported as either 4 if you have 4 or fewer cores, or 8 if you have more than 4 cores. And probably the most important thing here is the locally installed fonts will basically be reported as the same across any setup. So that was quite commonly used to identify people because a lot of people would have different fonts installed in their system based on software they have installed. So it's good to see this protection rolling out to Firefox. How do you feel about
Yeah,
this, Kevin?
I'm just looking through the features right now. I think it looks amazing. Um, of course, like we all know that anti-fingerprinting protections they vary among different browsers. We know with Brave, for example, it's not the best out there, despite the security improvements of being based on the Chromium. Um, However, I'm honestly excited that with the rather, even though it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a rather limited population outreach. If I remember properly, Firefox only has a few percentage of the global market share for browsers. The fact that Firefox is still like implementing a lot of these anti-fingerprinting features means that a lot more people will be protected. Um, Even if it's relatively a small amount of people, in the long term, it just means that more people will be not as easily profiled by folks who do use fingerprinting techniques. And mind you, it isn't just always some scary government person trying to profile you by collecting all this information. Oftentimes, it's advertisers as well who use browser fingerprinting to collect a profile of you just for the sake of advertising. And it's honestly quite creepy. They still try to collect the information of people who actively, don't use cookies or don't uh, opt into all these like tracking like techniques that you may see on your websites when you open them. Um, so all in all, I think it's a huge improvement for Firefox as a whole in terms of privacy. Um, I'm definitely still very concerned, however, on people rely on it as a crutch though. When there are definitely a lot of options out there, if you do need the maximum amount of fingerprint protections out there, Tor browser and Molvad are superior in these regards. Molvad's great if you don't want to use Tor all the time and you have a VPN with you. Tor is, well, Tor. We all know it's great. But then again, though, protecting the least common denominator is the most important part here. We want to protect average people who just want to make searches out there. That's it. And to be frank, any small step here is a victory in my guys.
Exactly. This is like a huge win for like the average person. And yeah, there's probably not that many people that are using Firefox compared to Chrome.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people that use Firefox are just kind of like sick of Chrome and they don't really change the settings. So I feel like we're definitely, when we're in the privacy community, we're definitely in like the minority when it comes to like configuring our browsers. Like not too many people are going through and tweaking all the settings like us. But it's good to see that Firefox is making more steps to protect people. I do think it's kind of interesting that like a lot of the protections that they're using don't really line up with that's basically offered in like the Tor browser or Molvad browser. A lot of them just they don't actually report values like that. They just stick to a single value. But it's interesting that Firefox is choosing to report multiple different values. I guess it's reducing entropy, but yeah, it's certainly interesting to see Firefox make at least some positive steps because it feels like
Mm.
we've had a sort of strange shift from Mozilla towards developing Firefox, where we've basically seen a lot of changes that a lot of users haven't really been happy with a lot of the changes. Like they've been focusing a little bit on AI foreshadowing. And yeah,
Oh.
it's definitely interesting that they scheduled these two changes that they've been making pretty close to each other. And I guess that kind of brings us into the next little sub story of this, which you can explain here, Kevin.
Oh, of course. So Firefox and AI, I feel like we've discussed this so many times in the past, but I think they finally like nailed that final nail in the coffin. Like it's horrible, horrible. Firefox adds AI windows. Users want AI wall to keep it out. So, I believe yesterday, the vice president head of project management of Firefox, Ajit Varma, released a blog post that coincided with this like new release of Firefox, detailing their general direction of how they will implement AI. And apparently, they've decided, you know what, let's really focus on our historical strength on containerization, separate everything containers. Let's just create a new type of window. Let's use an AI window. And this guy is quoted as saying, "It's a new and intelligent user-controlled space we're building in Firefox that lets you chat with an AI assistant and get help while you browse, all on your terms." And they claim that, of course, this feature is entirely opt-in, and that you will always be able to choose not to use the feature. Um, I Yeah, like I think I'm glad they're making it like an opt-in feature. Of course, I feel like opt-out features are de facto, uh, just forcing the vast majority of users who don't really know about this feature to have the data collected. So I'm glad that they're trying to figure out creative ways to implement AI. I appreciate the effort, but obviously, none of us want even more AI into Firefox. You cannot compete with like Chrome or OpenAI or Perplexity if you're looking for an AI browser here. Firefox does what it does best. Like a open browser which respects your privacy, right? And I feel like their sudden push to AI is a sudden push to figure out how do I make Firefox profitable, right? And it's quite clear that like with the concept of the AI window, um, does this supposed to have security benefits? Is this supposed to like a marketing tool? We're gonna say, oh, everything is separated on this specific tab here. Uh, I don't know. Like I'm just saying, I don't know the technical aspects of how this will work. Like, what's the difference between this and just opening up a dedicated profile, and that profile being your AI profile, for example? They released a similar profile feature like quite recently, actually. So I don't get the purpose of this besides that being a marketing tool to retain their privacy promise when implementing even more AI functionality into Firefox.
Yeah, it's if you see on the screen here, I've got like basically how it works is like it's sort of similar to like how private windows work, I guess. But like,
Mm,
when you press to make a new tab, you can choose, a new window, you can choose which type of window you want to have. Like you can have an AI window, you can have a private window. So it's like an additional type of window you can make. And I believe they did say in the blog post it was going to be like separate, the data was going to be separate from like your normal profile to like retain the privacy aspect. But Mozilla has been like kind of good about like implementing local AI models for things, which is better than just wholesale sending everyone's information to like OpenAI or just like Perplexity or any other of those sort of things. And last week we did see that they added the Perplexity AI search engine, or I think it was the week before that actually.
mm.
And they did add like Perplexity search engine, and a lot of people were just like, why? Why are you adding this? And it's kind of sad to see they've been working on even more AI stuff, because I feel like a lot of people go to Firefox to avoid this sort of stuff. They don't want this AI stuff. They don't want like all these like agentic systems, which I don't think an agentic AI, like an agentic browser, is compatible with privacy because it basically has to send everything to a third party, right? Unless that's done on your system, then I'm not sure how effective that would be and intensive that would be, but that doesn't really seem like the greatest
Yeah,
direction.
I mean, the whole point of having a personal agent is that you have a, I guess, like if I'm gonna like personify AI, imagine like a virtual person, like your personal servant or butler or concierge, like telling you, "Oh, let me order you this on Amazon. By the way, you say you want this. This is the cheapest option. Can I have your credit card?" And we see like a very early version of this through your smart speaker, right? The whole like Google Home Assistant, Amazon Alexa, so on and so forth. Um, and to see it kind of like be a proper term now instead of a gimmick concerns me because in almost every single discussion I have, either whether in university or in like professional workshops or just scrolling through TechCrunch for crying out loud, I hear the word agentic AI, agents over and over again. And on that point, I'm like, okay, if you don't want actual humans to like, work for you, just admit it. You don't want people to work for you anymore. Like you just want someone to help automate the process, which I guess is the appeal of it. But it comes at a severe cost to a lot of things in society, privacy, jobs, so on and so forth. Um, but actually, I have one quick question before we move on to the next article we have, Jordan. What do you mean by local AI models? Did Firefox like implement that recently, or do you mean like just more privacy respecting AI models?
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone's been following like exactly what Mozilla's been adding to Firefox because like a lot of people have everything sort of disabled. So if you've been using Firefox and you disabled a lot of that stuff, probably didn't see it
Guilty.
pop up in your yeah, you probably didn't see it pop up in your Firefox installation, but they've been adding stuff like auto tab grouping, which it has to be able to read the tab, the name of the tab, and then decide whether that should be added to a tab group. Um, and that was using like a very tiny AI model basically to like identify the category of the tab and put it into its own tab. And there was already issues with that because it was causing people's computer systems to actually use more power, and it was quite a horrendous amount more power as well. So you know, there's trade-offs to all this sort of stuff. Like the local AI models idea is interesting. They did also add like that AI sidebar as well, which you can use with an offline model within Firefox, but it also has third-party cloud models as well. But I think in general, when it comes to the privacy of this sort of stuff, it's going to be uh, when it comes to privacy only, we're only talking about privacy. It's going to be the best option is a local model, and if that's how this new AI window operates, then I'm not sure I would have that much of an issue with it. But I do think that adding these sort of like agentic features to a browser, like it increases the attack surface of your browser. So it increases the points where it can be exploited, basically. And I'm sure that this sort of agentic system has some guardrails, let's say, but there's always ways that we've been seeing quite a lot that there's ways that these agentic browsers can be exploited to basically run commands and prompts that the user didn't intend. So I think just having all these things that are added into a browser that are kind of unnecessary. Because if you compare like Firefox in like 2018 to a Firefox in like 2025, there's just all these extra things that they've been adding, like all these extra buttons and all these extra features that, you know, I'm not sure if they really improved the browser in all that many ways, and they do increase the areas where an attacker could exploit the browser. So it's important to think about that. And then there's also just the issues with, you know, ethics, right? Like AI's kind of the models themselves, even if you're using a local model, that AI model has to be trained somewhere, right? And the information that that model is trained on, where is it coming from? It's probably scraping the entire internet of everything. And that could include, you know, people's private information, copyrighted information, all sorts of stuff. And not only that, it's also requires a lot of electricity as well. So, you know, that's another ethical concern. And I think it's it's a pretty controversial thing. I think a lot of people are like interested in it, but there's also there's a large amount of pushback as well. So I'm not sure if this was like the greatest idea to go ahead with this, but I did notice that this guy named Ajit Varma, he worked as a product manager at Meta and Google. So not entirely sure why they're employing someone from Meta and Google to head their product management, but it's certainly an interesting decision, I suppose. Maybe they have like an interesting perspective to bring. I'm not sure, but that certainly is a little bit worrying.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you're kind of downplaying, you know, his qualifications of it because I feel like you know if you're at Meta and these big tech companies, you know what you're doing. The way you get there, you probably hopping on the AI train far before any of us are. So I think I gotta say it does make sense a lot for sure. And it's unfortunate like these like this very long trend of big tech alumni or you know alumni of these large consulting companies, for example, they think they could run the show and say, "Oh, we graduated from these like universities. We attended these like big tech universities." so on and so forth. And they try to, implement like these features. I'm just saying, wow, you don't know anything. You don't even know what AI is, honestly. Um, but yeah, I guess that's kind of like my 2 cents on this, though, for sure. Like, it's sad to see how Firefox believes that AI is the way that they'll try to like pivot, and w- only time will tell whether that works or not.
Yeah, it's just reading a message here from Jonah who's in the chat. Mozilla has always wished they were a big tech company like Google or Facebook, even when their community doesn't. Yeah, I think, I don't know, there's this weird like perspective that people have of Mozilla as like this community orientated indie web company. And then they seem to just be like, no, we're like the AI private advertising company now, which is very interesting. I guess, I mean, they must know what makes money, so I don't know if that makes them money. I suppose that's important for them. But I guess I feel like there's more money to be made in just making a really good browser that a lot of people like and that doesn't have predatory features and all that sort of stuff. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, maybe we'll leave that to the management consultants here who could figure out how to make Firefox more profitable. But I don't know. I'm not a consultant.
Yeah, same. I guess we can move on to the next story
Anyways,
here. This is sort of a big story that has been going on in the recent couple of months. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally, the wait is over. Android 16 QPL1 source code is now available on AOSP. So if you haven't kind of been following this podcast for a while, we've kind of just been wondering for quite a while where the Android 16 QPL1 source code was, because it's basically been like this this issue with Google not releasing it, and it's kind of stopped custom OS developers such as like Graphene OS, which we recommend, from releasing the Android 16 QPL1 update. And basically the this release, if you're not aware because you're using Graphene OS or you're not using a up-to-date device, basically Android 16 QPL1 basically adds a whole new like interface redesign called Material 3 Expressive, and also desktop mode. So that was kind of a thing that a lot of people were excited for. I know on our forum there was a discussion there about Android 16 QPL1 desktop mode and being able to use like a Pixel device as a computer basically. So kind of to recap the story, Google released the Android 16 QPL1 update for Pixel devices in early September, and its source code was conspicuously absent, as Google traditionally publishes the source code for new Android versions within a day or two of their release. And according to this article, Android Authority contacted Google and they said that it would be released in the coming weeks. And it looks like Google has made good on that promise, and Android 16 QPL1 source code is now available. And let me just quickly see what I wrote here in the document. Okay, so basically, to sort of bypass this this issue with Google not releasing the Android 16 QPL1 source code, Graphene OS has basically created security preview releases. And basically this is because they have access to the security patches through an OEM partner, which basically allows them to keep their users protected against security threats, even if they're not getting the major feature updates. And basically Android vendors receive security patches up to 3 months earlier than they're released to the public, which allowed Graphene OS to ship the security fixes basically almost as soon as the Pixels receive them, except they weren't able to update the user space code because it hadn't been published to the AOSP branch. But there's been quite a lot of speculation about this delay from Google, and some said that maybe it's to do with the layoffs in the tech sector, possibly affecting the way that they were able to release this. But It's good to say they've finally released it, but Graphene OS has mentioned on Mastodon that the new security patch system being used by Android is confusing for users and bad for the security of anyone not using Graphene OS. With our security preview releases, we could have set the patch level string to 2025 1101 in early September, but in this case, we didn't do that. So basically, it seems like Google's changed the release schedule of things a little bit and the way they're handling security updates, which is kind of leaving people a bit confused about the situation, which is interesting, I suppose. How do you feel about this, Kevin?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Um, like that's the thing though. It's a worrying trend. We don't know what's going on. I read some new speculation why they delayed this release, and one user said that um, you know, if they're trying to go all in on Android being the future successor of, let's say, something like Chrome OS, for example, um, it will be a huge pivot, mind you. Android is trying to become a desktop level competitor right now, and it'll take a long development. There's a lot of really fascinating, like progress in this field, but there's a very realistic chance that the fact that desktop mode is almost the center point of this release proves to be that there is a slight chance that Google may just want to like keep their code proprietary just for like one more month until they flesh things out. But then again, that's all speculation, though. We don't know for sure. Maybe it is really the horrible layoffs that's going on right now. Um, but I'm also really excited for desktop mode, at least how it will be used in Graphene OS. I think we all kind of joked how one day phones will be our computers, and we don't need to have carry these big boxes around every time we move houses. We can just carry our phones, and it's great, of course. I definitely do want to emphasize that it will be a long time before it will be in a usable states unless you don't actually like have a lot of important things to do on your uh, computer right now. Then honestly, I don't see any reason why you like shouldn't be able to like use desktop mode for casual things, as long as you don't try to edit frequently, for example. I'm a little concerned about how the lack of a fan may uh, damage that process, but we will for sure try to see and review how desktop mode works on Graphene OS once that is implemented. I think a lot of us are really excited for this release, and we're really, really curious to hear from you actually on how you will plan to use desktop mode if you decide to replace your computer with it. Um, Once again, it's still in the very like new stages of release, so we don't really recommend it so far unless there are a few like quality of life features for you. But it's very has a lot of exciting implications on the future of secure and private computing. Who knows? Maybe in our recommendations one day we'll just have a section saying, "Oh, you can just use your phone. Why buy a computer? One device for everything." Um, but then again, Jordan, what do you think? Would you ever replace your computer with a phone if technology kind of progresses that path, or would you miss these like laptops and desktop PCs that we have right now?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I kind of like just like the customization of like desktop computing, like like the whole thing where you can like customize a desktop PC, like you can choose what graphics card, what CPU. It's repairable. I think maybe if phones became like more repairable and more like customizable, maybe I'd be more interested. But it's just, yeah, there's a bit of a performance gap, like you kind of said. There's like it's I'm not sure if there would be a similar level of performance, but I think it's interesting though because I think a lot of people just use their computer as like Chrome. That's all they do on it. They just go into the browser and that's like basically it. So I mean, desktop mode could work for those people, and people do a lot of stuff in their browser, and if that's all they need, then I'm sure that desktop mode could be a decent option for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I also want to emphasize like an operating system, especially on mobile, is very secure. Which you might not even think about it if you haven't really read up on this before. Normally, you don't usually associate your Android or iOS phone as a particularly secure device compared to running Linux and running everything through to Tor. But I remember there was a blog on our forum actually, and there's a lot of people arguing about it. I think it was under like a Windows like security guide proposal, and people were arguing whether or not like Windows is actually technically more secure than uh, Linux PCs, despite the privacy drawbacks. And it was a lot of activity on it. And I when I first like before I was even an intern, I read into it, and I learned a lot about how, oh wait, the security model of Android and iOS, especially with its you know like things like sandboxing or like permissions, access controls. Um, it was very like fun to like learn about. I didn't know that. Oh wait, there's actually a genuine need to like have a something like Graphene OS have desktop mode on it because it's technically one of the most secure things out there. Despite the implications of having like a cellular data modem attached to your device and whatnot. But then again, I think that's kind of like beyond the knowledge of what I have. But at least what I know of people on the forum, they're really excited for desktop mode. And who knows, maybe for a lot of folks with high threat models out there, they might even ditch their PCs entirely and just use like a Graphene OS phone if that eventually ends up being more like, let's say, finalized, let's say, in the future. But of course, we don't recommend this now. Let the team work it out. We don't even know if this will even be like work for Graphene OS. So as soon as I'm sure they push this update, there'll be a lot of exciting news to talk about. But for now, like we're just kind of like discussing the implications of it. Right, Jordan?
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points about like the
Oh,
security
Jordan, are you
aspects.
muted by any chance?
Apologies. Yeah. So I think you bring up some good points about like the privacy aspects um I mean security aspects of Graphene OS compared to like a desktop operating system. And I think it's kind of interesting to see that Google has sort of moved towards Chrome OS and Android sort of blending together. So maybe we'll see more improvements on like, a desktop mode or like a desktop more, desktop level features on Android devices. It's certainly an interesting future to see, and I'm kind of hyped for it actually. Um,
Yeah, very hyped for it. Who knows? Maybe we'll see like a Graphene OS laptop eventually, because it turns out that like a Chromebook is basically just an Android like phone on a laptop. So hey, like time does fly, and then maybe this is the future. We don't know.
yeah, it's definitely an exciting thing here to look out for.
Anyways, I feel like we can definitely discuss our next article. I believe it will be on chat control. Love it. Oh, once again, like I feel like every time we talk about chat control on the show, there's always good news and bad news. It's a bit of a trend going on, you may notice. And Reclaim the Net has released a blog detailing a lot of updates that we've learned about chat control ever since it was initially, I guess, withdrawn by the Danish presidency. So in the blog, the disguised return of EU's private messaging scanning plot. Um, Essentially, what have happened is that there was a leaked document around detailing a November 4th meeting, and in this meeting, it covers a lot of very interesting bullet points about the new compromise proposal. And essentially, what they're doing is rewarding what Child Control was, which was mandatory client-side scanning, meaning your phones will be scanned for all your messages that may or may not contain illegal material. Now, of course, it has been redisguised as quote unquote risk mitigation. And risk mitigation, it really just means that in the EU, service providers like WhatsApp or your email provider are strongly encouraged or mandated to implement proper risk mitigation features to prevent the spread of, CSAM and other legal content. And it's a very vague wording. It's de facto a requirement for these platforms to opt in into what they want as voluntary scanning, because apparently the change now, instead of being mandatory, but it's voluntary, but in reality it's actually mandatory. It's it's very confusing wording. Politicians love doing this, as you may know, and that's not even the worst part of it, of course. I'm going to read just a few paragraphs of this blog, actually, from our wonderful friend Patrick Breyer. Um, for context, he was a former MEP and a jurist who's been very passionate and done a lot of amazing work for the anti-tech control movement. In a release sent to Reclaim the Net, Breyer, long a defender of freedom, argued that the commission has quietly reintroduced compulsory scanning of private messages after it was previously rejected. She described the move as a deceptive sleight of hand, insisting that it transformed a supposedly voluntary framework into a system that could compel all chat, email, and messaging providers to monitor users. This is a political deception of the highest order, Breyer said. Following loud public protests, several member states, including Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, and Austria, said no to indiscriminate chat control. Now it's coming back through the backdoor disguise, more dangerous, and more comprehensive than ever. The public's being played for fools. Under the attacks, providers will be obligated to take all appropriate risk mitigation measures to prevent abuse on their platforms. While the Commission presents this as a flexible safety requirement, Breyer says it's a loophole that could justify forcing companies to scan every private message, including those protected by end-to-end encryption. And you know, obviously here, like Barry also goes to a lot more examples of how this could be like manipulated into a lot of other things, such as, for example, flirting between your partner, for example, or what if you're talking to your daughter or your therapist or your partner, and then it gets misconstrued into something that's could be interpreted as illegal material by this AI system that the Europeans really want to implement, for this like scanning. So it's very concerning, but that's not all of it actually. No, there's a few other bullet points as well in this like the compromise proposal. It will also ban anonymous communication, meaning the age verification will be mandatory for almost all services. So gone are days where it could be anonymous on the internet, I guess, and posts on forums. Now you have to actually have some sort of like identity attached to it, such as your ID card or whatnot. Um, and I believe there's also like a form of digital house arrest, and it's it's very confusing to see how it operates, but essentially it's supposed to like be some sort of like status someone can get if, for example, like when all of their access to several internet services gets revoked, for example. And most importantly, it prevents a lot of people under the age of 18 to access a lot of internet services as well. So it's honestly like devastating, like I feel like it's in a lot of ways worse than what we've initially thought child control was. Because of course I'm sure like they already had these plans before. Just to make that clear, like as I'm not saying that just because they switch it from mandatory to non-mandatory scanning means like, something like, worse or better. I'm just stating that this is the plan all along. And the fact that government officials believing that privacy and anonymity is not a human right, even though it may claim that it is for certain cases, just through the GDPR, um, it's clear that what the EU wants is control over its citizens, control over its data. And as much as we like to praise the EU for its effective policies on antitrust regulation or having general data protection legislation, um, all of it is just a means of control. It's not necessarily like out of the goodwill out of these politicians. And as much as like they claim to hide behind fighting cybercrime, it's clear that what they're actually doing is implementing control over the internet and governing the residents and citizens respectively. But yeah, Jordan, you've seen the news develop time and time again. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's definitely extremely worrying, and I've been looking into this more and more because we're working on like a video about chat control. Um, and I think it's pretty important to like kind of debunk a lot of things on this because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation, I guess, or like people saying stuff that's like not true about it. So I think this scanning that they're doing on people's devices, client-side scanning, if that gets implemented in the EU, it's pretty common that like, all those criminals that are using encrypted apps, they'll just move to apps that are outside the EU jurisdiction. And that'll be kind of easy for them to bypass, I guess. And, the AI detection models that they use for this sort of stuff will basically cause, police to be kind of flooded with all these reports of people sending inappropriate things, like Kevin said, with like, you might be just like flirting with your partner or doing something like that, and it might be detected as like CSAM, or it might be detected as any sort of like,
Like
illegal
grooming?
material, grooming, yeah, any sort of like illegal material basically. And there's also kind of the argument that, like, law enforcement, what are they going to do if they can't access the information about everyone's messages that they're sending? But I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. Police have never had more data to work with than basically any point in history. Basically, the digital world that we live in, basically everyone has like a massive digital paper trail just by going through their daily lives. And even if police don't have access to the encrypted data, metadata is also kind of important and can also sometimes reveal just as much information as the messages themselves. And usually, if police have think someone is a suspect, right, they will have to basically go through the whole process, like the judicial process, to obtain a warrant to request their data. And if chat control gets implemented as like a client-side scanning system, it basically treats everyone as a suspect and it's mass surveillance. That's literally what it is. And it's that's a problem, right? And
Very. It's a huge problem to like assume that, you know, just because you're trying to prevent a crime, you must, you know, delve into these measures. And the best way I can describe it is, do you want the police to install a camera in your like house? Because, fun fact, a lot of these horrible crimes are committed, in your family home without anyone knowing. Why don't we have mandatory cameras under every single someone's home that's operated by the government? That this is the issue here. The police already has a ton of methods to use to actually like, combat cybercrime. At least for like from my knowledge, of course, as you mentioned, metadata, right? The United States uses metadata to find and take down terrorist networks. It's a thing and process they've been developing for decades now. I believe there's a book called We Kill People with Metadata," and it's from a quote from an NSA like chief or something like that. And I found that like really interesting when I read it, of course, because oftentimes the police have worked with even less information in the past, and they still were able to do a lot of really great things. I would say with just metadata, and the fact that you need access to the content data itself through every single text, every single image or video proves to show that they're just taking a lazy way around. It's like there's so many like reports out there of platforms taking down CSAM, and it's not necessarily the fact that we don't know it's CSAM or being spread. Usually, oftentimes you do. The issues, of course, is scale. It's funding. Moderators get overwhelmed with this stuff. And the question kind of goes to now, okay, instead of policing everyone's like, messages on private communications and banning end-to-end encryption, well, maybe it's not a ban, but it basically is. Um, how about we actually develop solutions that respect both the privacy of our constituents and also combat horrible crimes like these? Once again, no one's saying yes to having a camera installed in their homes operated by the government. No one's saying that. But yet, a lot of folks tend to like support these kind of measures, which really confuse me.
yeah, it's I think another thing that people have been saying is like, who is pushing for this? Because everyone that I've really seen that's seen, at least when it comes to like the client side scanning stuff, who is in support of this? Like I've really just seen no public support for this sort of thing, and it's kind of unfortunate that we're seeing, uh basically it getting pushed through the EU Parliament without any democratic say from people, and it's even worse than it was before. Like Kevin mentioned, I think this is including more than just your uploaded photos and stuff. It's including like chat messages, any internet related content. So um, it's very concerning, and I guess we can call people to action here. If you're an EU citizen, you don't have to live in the EU, but if you're an EU citizen, you can contact your representatives through the fightchatcontrol.eu website. So if you visit that website, you'll be able to select your member state. And then when you select that state, for example, let's say I'm going to select Belgium, it'll scroll down and then it will show you all the representatives in your country, and you can basically call them or email them So if you want to, make your voice heard and make sure that this sort of stuff doesn't get pushed through, I think it's definitely worth making a stand and actually using your voice to try to do that. I would say, any time you see any posts on social media, if you're on any social platforms, try and boost that to get people aware of what's going on, because unfortunately, this isn't getting enough media attention, I don't think. I think that a lot of the European news outlets aren't covering this story, and it's sort of a bit unfortunate because it is so critical to people's freedoms and it's not really being talked about enough.
Yeah, and I'm also like I'm not sure I should be impressed or disgusted by the lack of mainstream coverage out here. I feel like the mainstream media tends to cover, events like these through, oh, this has been defeated. Oh, this is past. Never. This is ongoing. I remember I saw like a BBC article about this, and it only really covered check control like when it was first defeated by Germany, right? It never really gave continuous updates, like you may see from, really reliable sources as Patrick Breyer, who've been on top of this. So if you go to his website, for example, you could see a continuous like timeline and detailed explanations of what's actually going on. Um, he has his sources, and he's been very involved in this. And if you do want to learn more about stopping chat control. He's a definite an amazing source for all this. And I also do recommend like just absolutely all websites that we have shared in the past, such as fightchatcontrol.eu, for example. Um, but yeah, like it's so sad to see this situation like unfold again. And we will cover it in the future, of course, let you know if there are any updates. And hopefully this will all come to the end. Jordan, do you feel like this is enough for chat control for now? And do you want to move on to Android yet again?
Yes. So what was the next story we've got here? I'm not sure if I have that one.
Yeah, I have it up. I can actually cover this. So and Google is easing up on Android's new side loading restrictions. Should I wait until you pull it up on your screen?
No, just go ahead. Sure, just go ahead. Yeah.
All right, okay, got it. So as you may have heard, also, uh, Google is trying to really like lock down, the Android ecosystem and trying to implement a way in which like folks can install apps on their phones more securely, as they so claimed. And despite the fact that malware can be found throughout the Google Play Store, there has been a recent trend of Google trying to crack down on this. And you know, some may see that their proposed feature to have mandatory developer verification, um, as a way for them to amp up the security, but at the same time, it also really like worries a lot of folks, especially open source advocates, who you historically relied on third-party apps stores such as F-Droid, for example, or a Crescent and the official Graphene OS store. But this is supposed to affect stock Android. So, for example, if you have a custom ROM, the verification won't necessarily affect you. But the idea is that if you own a stock Android device, um, you are not able to install apps that have not been verified through this program. And there will be a cost, unfortunately, to verify yourself as a developer. So it could really like hamper like the false spirit, I'd say, of hobbyist developers making apps sharing for everyone for free. A lot of folks were angry about this, and Google has actually surprisingly heard from them and trying to figure out a way to make it harder for folks to disable that. But they're still offering the option nonetheless. And of course, we don't really know how this will go. They've stated in a blog post actually that um, they will figure out a way to allow advanced users to enable side loading, but this will come through the form of trying to notify less advanced users, day-to-day users who may be walked through the process by a scammer. So most likely, when they try to enable it in settings, they may be reached by like a timed prompt saying that, "Hey, doing this could um, worsen your device security. Please do not do this. If there's a scammer, please don't listen to them." And so that's kind of like the speculation we have in the forum so far. But so far, I would say it's a very positive update, and we will definitely give you more information once this feature is rolled up officially. Um, But yeah, I think that's all we have, I'd say, on this side loading business. Do you have any quick thoughts before we move on to the next article, Jordan?
No, I just think that it's kind of sad that this is even sort of an issue at this point. I think th- maybe if they made it so that there was like a process that you could go through to unlock like accessing side loading, that was a little bit more tricky that some people may not be able to access. It might protect people, but yeah, I'm not really sure if what we'll see when it comes to like, you know, the changes that will be made by Google to like allow unverified developers to access things.
Yeah, I think like any sort of like small victory is still a victory in my eyes, and at least this option won't be removed for the users that do need it. But it will make it harder for folks to access it if they do want to sideload. Um, but at the end of the day, it's more of like a UI UX issue. For folks who really want to sideload, they can always either do through that setting or install an alternative operating system entirely. But um, but yeah, I think it's good to see this, and I think we might move on to our next and final article. Actually, do you have it up?
Yes. So Elon Musk's X botched its security key switchover, locking users out. So I don't know if you've seen, but basically, Elon Musk's X platform has been moving away from the Twitter domain for quite a while now because uh, I guess the owner Elon Musk doesn't really like the branding of Twitter, I suppose, and he wants to make it like his own thing. So they've been moving towards using x.com instead of twitter.com. And basically, the just quoting from the newsletter that we've been writing up here, basically they've locked potentially thousands of users from using their accounts because of a botched security key switchover. Uh, Passkeys using the FIDO2 standard are linked to website domains, meaning that users must manually re-enroll their passkey or security key to the new domain. The platform has set a deadline for November 10th for passkey and security key users to transition their keys. Given that X or Twitter only gave a 15-day notice to users, we are not surprised by this debacle at all. And basically, there was some issues that people were having where they weren't able to actually re-enroll their key into the new domain, and there was errors happening, effectively locking people out of their accounts. And of course, when it comes to any form of security, we always recommend using security keys or passkeys over a standard password and 2FA code because there's a high level of security. So it's unfortunate that the users with the highest level of security are now being locked out of their accounts. So it's definitely important to stay on top of that. I'm sure that they might have gotten on top of this now, but it seems that Elon Musk was still happily tweeting away. So it seems he was not aware of the issue. So many users that are in higher risk situations were probably using passkeys and security keys to protect their account because it offers an additional layer of security. So it's kind of troubling to see that those users were unable to access their accounts.
Hmm. Yeah, I am not surprised by this. Elon Musk has always been obsessed with like detaching the Twitter identity away from X. And of course, like, this is I'm glad they at least thought about giving them some notice. I won't be surprised if they no notice at all. But it's quite telling that when they tell security key users to transition and disenroll and re-enroll the security keys under YubiKey, for example, um, and you only give them a 2-week notice is insane to me. The fact there isn't any communication whatsoever beyond that Twitter post by the support team um, makes it very clear to me they don't really like think about the security and privacy concerns of their users at all. Um, and I also want to emphasize to our audience right now, passkeys are more secure for a reason. There have been countless vulnerabilities where an attacker could theoretically read any one-time passcode prompts that may appear on your authentication app, for example. There have been instances where attackers can read your SMS texts through swim swapping. And two-factor authentication isn't perfect, even it's so much better than just using your password. That's why a lot of folks have been trying to like severely advocate for a complete transition away from traditional means of 2FA into using passkeys. Sorry. Um, so I emphasize this completely. Please keep using your passkey. Events like these are quite rare. Um, I do recommend being incredibly diligent of any websites that may announce a domain change in the future. So definitely keep updated. And I think something like this, which is a very rare instance, is not necessarily a reason why you should switch away from passkeys. Please continue using them. Just remain diligent and try to avoid, for example, throwing your backup codes, for example, because these backup codes um, allow you to log into your account even if you lost all access to your original 2FA method. So if this does happen, make sure to keep your backup codes in a safe somewhere, um, preferably away from any computer. Um, and just remember that passkeys are good. Do not uh, throw them away just because you can't log into your Twitter account now.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny. Jonah made a comment in the live chat. Getting locked out of Twitter is a bit of a blessing, anyways. Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to say anymore. But yeah, I think it's definitely an unfortunate situation, and I think that there's still a lot of journalists who rely on that platform. So it's kind of unfortunate that possibly a bunch of journalists are not being able to access their social media, their X account. So yeah, I would keep an eye on this if you do use security keys. Maybe try logging into your account and see if you're affected. And maybe try getting in touch with their support team if they have one. But yeah, I think it's sort of a short story here, but yeah, kind of a good way to finish things out, I suppose.
Yeah, it's funny thing, also sad thing sometimes, you know. Um, but just one quick comment before we move on to form updates. I want to emphasize that a lot of people that use passkeys, specifically like hardware-based passkeys, are organizations. So I won't be surprised if a lot of these like users are locked out were actually enterprise level users. So I don't know, maybe they'll think twice about using Twitter from now on, you know, and should finally get away from this behemoth. Oh, sorry, X. My apologies. Sorry, Elon. um, anyways, yeah, I think it's a good segment away um, into form updates. And I believe we have
Yes.
a update about a interesting topic. Unfortunately, it's about a YouTube video made by a content creator called the Hated One, and apparently this user on our forum um, really wanted to discuss the ethics of sponsorship, the ethics of content creation in this space. What do you call this niche? Privacy and security, consumer privacy and security, because I believe that there's a very common like existence of like a very academic, very rigorous analysis of what security privacy is and what consumer level aspect of what security and privacy is. And obviously, an organization like Privacy Guides, we're more focused on educating folks who may not have domain specific knowledge of privacy and security. Um, but there is a concern, however, is that content creators who do operate in this space, should we trust them, especially when money is involved? And this is what this user was initially concerned about. Is it like a huge problem for content creators to be sponsored by products? Is it a huge problem for these content creators to make reviews of said products? And there's been a lot of back and forth on this forum on whether or not it's ethical or not. Some folks are saying it's completely unethical. Some folks believe that content creation is not particularly possible in a field like privacy because of how money corrupts folks. Um, but there are also a lot of folks who also like argued that there's nothing wrong with trying to spread, common knowledge about basic security and privacy practices, and that at the end of the day, they're here to just simply talk about these rather complicated issues and make it digestible for common folks and try to like spread the word, as you may say. Um, Jordan, generally speaking, though, like, what do you think? Like, do you believe that it's ethical to be a content creator, like in the RIC space, and how do you like view that as someone who makes content for our video platform?
I think when it comes to taking sponsorships and affiliate links, privacy guides is basically, completely independent from those sort of platforms. And I do think in a lot of ways it is kind of important to have an independent platform and not to take money from sponsors and affiliates, because as much as someone can say that it doesn't color their view of a product, when you're receiving money or any compensation for something, it certainly does color the way that you see something. So I think we can't deny that. Like, there's no way anyone can deny that, right? But I think, in the case of this particular content creator, I think, it's good to have people that have strong opinions and that have strong thoughts on things. And I think, if they believe that that's an incredibly important part of things, and I think that's important, that they should pursue what they think is morally correct, and anyone else who's covering things should as well. But when it comes to privacy guides, I think, we're in an extremely unique position because we don't take any sponsorships or any affiliates. We rely on donations to basically fund this entire operation, and I think that allows us to have a much more objective view of things and to analyze things based on their merit rather than whether we're receiving a paycheck or whether we're receiving any, compensation for promoting something. And I think it's a good point to bring up, but I think, I'm not sure if it's entirely productive to, call out people that do have a different thought process to you, because I think it's more important to, spread information, important information to people, and you should do that in a way that you think is correct. So that's sort of my thoughts on that entire process there. But what were you thinking, Kevin?
I think as someone who isn't a content creator, well, technically I am, with this podcast, of course, but as someone who doesn't really consider herself like someone who makes content, I, I I'd want to emphasize the amount of impact that content creators have on all of us. First, for me, like I started my journey with tech lore, and ironically, the hidden one too. I watched a few of his videos, and it really did inspire me to like go on this path. I'd say, um, just for clear disclosure. But of course, I want to emphasize there has to be some initiative on your end to not blindly trust any sort of person on the internet. At the end of the day, what's preventing me from making a YouTube channel and saying all these obviously like publicly like shared things about basic security practices? I could be reading verbatim off like privacy guides, like recommendations, for example, and make a decent living off that. Does that make me a reliable source over, let's say, a technologist? Does it make you a reliable source over an academic? Not necessarily, of course. But of course, it's very easy for someone with a camera to talk about whatever. Um, and at the end of the day, these content creators are human, and they've done an amazing job of trying to bridge this information gap between these technologists and the average folk. And let's take it at face value. They are humans too. They do need money, but at the end of the day, you are the one responsible for your privacy journey. It is your job to vet the people that you watch. It is your job to trust them. And if you believe that there's something that they have done that's wrong, call them out on it, of course. Um, Everyone deserves some scrutiny on what they say, or else, what's the point of having a brain, So I just want to make it very clear that it's not anyone's job or role to say, this person's not reliable, this person's not reliable. It is your job. And it's your job to do research and figure out what's best for you. Because at the end of the day, I don't know what's best for you. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Jordan doesn't know what's best for you 100% of the time. but you are responsible for your learning. And people like, Techlore or people like Privacy Guides, like we all are here to help you with this, of course. And regardless of we either believe that sponsorships are, a bad thing or not, you're allowed to have these thoughts and opinions, of course. I just want to like, I also want to emphasize that I did not work for Techlore. I've watched some of his videos before. I just want to emphasize that at the end of the day, that don't trust content creators blindly. Just use them as a resource, as a tool, essentially.
Yeah, and I think, you definitely, you shouldn't trust every single thing that Privacy Guides has and says as the default being correct, right? You should use multiple sources. You should analyze the things that we say and think about things yourself. Like Kevin said, you know, I think if you look at these videos from these content creators that was being criticized in the Hated Ones video, um, I think you should be smart enough to realize what they're saying that it's correct and what they're saying that's not correct, and be able to decide for yourself what tools you're going to use, what software, what hardware. And I do think that is kind of an important part of people going through your privacy journey. And, it's 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 tricky. It's definitely tricky. And I think, it was quite a interesting discussion on the forum. So I think if you're interested in reading a bit more into like what people's thoughts were, getting a bit more in depth on that, definitely check out a link. Check out the link in the newsletter on that, and you'll be able to follow the discussion that was going on there.
Yeah, of course. I want to emphasize that we don't usually show forum discussions on the show. You might be confused by just hearing this. Uh, but if you want to read the full text, I would recommend that you visit the forum directly, just so we don't like dox like their usernames, for example. That's kind of a policy we have. If you post in the forum, in the chat, or in the forum thread about the live stream, you will appear on the video itself. But if you just post it on the forum itself, we want to make a promise that you will not like appear on the live stream. So just keep that in mind that if you're confused by the conversation we have, feel free to like look into our website, and we'll put links in our newsletter in the chat about this forum thread for you to look into yourself. On that note, I think we can start answering any questions. I believe there are quite a few in the original like announcement thread we have about this live stream.
Yes, there was some. We had some good questions this week, and we can kind of dive straight into those um, if you're happy to move straight into Q&A here. So just to remind everybody, if you leave any questions, you can leave them in the YouTube chat or on the platform that you're watching on, and you can also leave them on the forum, which is discuss.privacyguides.net. And you should see it's the top pinned post on the forum right now. And with that being said, let's move into the Q&A section. So I'll have the live chat on screen here, so any questions that you leave will be shown on the screen, just so you're aware. And okay, so the first question we've got here is from Kisu, who's a Kissa. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing
Probably
your name.
kiss you, right?
I,
Like I think it's like a play on, right?
I'm not sure. But I hope I'm saying it right. Yes, you can basically ask any kind of question within reason. But given the VPN recommendations, what that we do have on the website, is it feasible to have some split tunneling in the case of a household-wide VPN? Let's say I do have OpenWRT router with a WireGuard setup from one of these providers. I do connect to the router via Wi-Fi. Could I somehow still be able to select a specific subset of devices and allow them to access some websites without going through the VPN? I don't feel like disabling my Wi-Fi and accessing them with 5G is the way to go. Yes, so basically there's I think before we kind of get into like a lot of the specifics on this, this is kind of a complex topic to talk about without getting into like, networking stuff. But there is a way you can set up multiple different Wi-Fi networks, and you can basically choose which which Wi-Fi networks will be routed through the WireGuard connection on OpenWRT. I have done that. It does work. You might have to do a bit of research on how exactly to do that, because I can't really provide like a way to do that on this stream. But I will say it's perfectly reasonable to do that, and it's definitely possible. But yeah, you'll have to set up like separate VLANs and separate Wi-Fi connections. So I don't know. You'll have to look a little bit into that. It certainly is possible though. And it also could be, you know, there's a possibility that if you want to make it a bit easier, you could just use two routers, one that has OpenWRT on it and one that doesn't, and just connect to whichever one you want. That has the WireGuard connection and one that doesn't. Or you could set up a guest network on another router. But yeah, it certainly is possible, but it is diving into like a little bit more of a complex setup. So I think you might have to do some more research about exactly how that would work.
Yeah, I think amazing answer, Jordan. I haven't personally tried self-hosting anything and for quite some time, so I don't have a good comment on my end. But if you do want to learn more, feel free to ask a question on the forum. Maybe there's a lot of folks who have a lot of experience trying with that exact same problem, and who knows, maybe someone has done exactly what you want, and whereas able to get like a few devices to like not have access that router VPN that you have. Anyways, I think we move on to the next question by Privacy is Consent. Love your name. Sorry, the questions are so long. It's fine. It's fine. We'll read it just for you. When Mozilla talked about plans to invest their time, involvement, resources in improving privacy preserving ad click measurement tech, the backlash from social firms was immense. Do you feel they're justified in doing that? If it also means they can be more aggressive with rolling out privacy improvements in the browser? For context, see Brave ads or Brave Shields or Apple PCM, private click measurement, and ITP, intelligence tracking prevention. Some of this may be out of date. The Safari documentation website seems to be dated November 2019. Oh, that's old. And the second question that they asked is also, what is the general feeling on the best example of a private browser, and what standards should the various browser vendors be aiming for? Without thinking too much about it, I would assume the common answer is mobile browser plus a popular network privacy tool. I'm assuming VPN probably, right? But what about the usability gap in terms of websites and website features breaking to browsers like Brave, Safari, and Firefox? To put it another way, how much of privacytest.org should a mainstream browser pass in a comparison to Tor/Movad before you would be comfortable telling a friend or family member that that is a private browser? Or have they already passed that standard in your view? Should something like profiles, containers, and free VPNs be a mainstream goal? Or is it mainly just for power users? This is a power user feature on Firefox and Safari and Silo regular users to get that functionality for free for just using private tabs. Oh, yeah, that's definitely a lot of questions for sure, but we'll definitely break it up part by part for you and try to like get you the help that you need. Um, so for starters, like for your first question about Mozilla's plan on implementing privacy, like preserving ad tech, I guess a lot of us are only really disappointed by this because they're spending so much time and resources on trying to develop a new standard, right? This is the idea. If Mozilla becomes the leader of making ads private and free to use for everyone, I mean the whole industry gets more private, right? I guess that's what Mozilla is trying to do. And this is the issue. It's tough being a leader in this regards. Why would someone want ads to be private in the first place? Think about it. By by its definition, ads are supposed to collect your information, right? While private ads may be a good thing for people like us, the consumer, in reality, big corporations and social media platforms want as much information from you as possible so they could do uh, targeted advertisements, send it out to you. Um, so I want to like emphasize that this isn't necessarily like a criticism on the idea of having private ads. It's more so a criticism of Mozilla trying to be a leader in those regards and focusing a lot of resources on developing this private ad tech without also recognizing that most of their users currently, the remaining users, don't care for that. And there's a lot of genuine, like, genuinely good things about Firefox that people love about it, which is the fact that it's private and it's really heavily customizable. It's the only real alternative to traditional browsers like Chromium-based browsers and WebKit-based browsers through Safari. Um, so I think it's more so a priorities thing. It's not necessarily that it's bad that they're developing tech for this. We really doubt whether this will actually be adopted by the mainstream ad tech industry. And based on what we know about it, they probably won't. But who knows? Maybe one day there'll be a national worldwide regulation stating that you must use privacy respecting ad tech. And then maybe Firefox will get their breakthrough. Sorry, Mozilla will get their breakthrough through, developing this technology. But again, we don't know. Um, Also, for the second questions, Jordan, what do you think about this? Actually, do you think there's like a common like browser that people should use, or do you think it should be like individualized per person?
I think you kind of covered things pretty eloquently there. I think, there's this, I don't think, like we kind of talked about it a bit earlier, but like, um, you should look at what a lot of experts are saying. You should see what Privacy Guides recommends. You should see what other experts are saying. And, if you find that you find one area more compelling about another browser, or you're fine with some of the downsides of another browser that's not mentioned on Privacy Guides or mentioned by another expert, I think it's you're within your rights, within your ideas to consider using a different browser that isn't commonly recommended. For example, I am kind of obsessed with vertical tabs, and basically no other browser has like an implementation that's similar to Arc browser. And that's why I'm using Zen browser, which isn't recommended by privacy guides. It's not recommended that much for privacy, but it's just based on Firefox, and it has a lot of the great protections that Firefox has. And I personally find that's fine for getting work stuff done. And, I think you should use the tools that you find are the best at what you're doing, right? Like, for example, I use a Mac for a lot of the video production that we do here at Privacy Guides, and that's because there's not really a good alternative to like Apple macOS or Microsoft Windows that can run a lot of the professional software that we need to develop to produce these pieces of content that you're watching, right? And I hope one day we do get to a point where, there is a good alternative that is available in Linux, or maybe DaVinci Resolve gets better support for Linux, or there's, Photoshop or Affinity is available in Linux, and that would definitely be really cool to see. But at the current state right now, for what I'm doing, it makes more sense to use a Mac OS device or a Windows device. So I think you should do the same thing for yourself, right? If you think that Molvad browser's too extreme, go for Brave, go for Safari, go for Firefox, but you should be aware of the limitations that you will have when you use a browser that doesn't have as extreme privacy protections like Molvad browser or Tor browser. And you should think about, how that might affect the risks that you're trying to avoid, the threats you're worried about. And I think that'll be much, much more clear once we get that threat modeling course out, to kind of help people with these discussions. Because I think a lot of times this is very this is a very like interesting sort of topic that comes up quite a lot about people, making extreme choices and things. And it's threat modeling is kind of important in that process. I also want to say thank you, Big Flower Pot 5, for the comment on the stream. Really appreciate that. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I've kind of been rambling a little bit, Kevin. But what do you feel?
Hmm. I do agree with you. There isn't really a perfect browser out there, and I think applying some basic threat modeling practices through your friend, for example, or a family member that you want to recommend a private browser to, would be amazing. But if you want some advice, I can give you like a few like tips on how you can probably like approach this. For example, something like Brave is a very accessible um, browser. I would say it's very accessible. A lot of common websites that are very picky with what browsers support will tend to be more like supported by Brave because it's based off Chromium, which is like the back end of something like Google Chrome. Um, of course, like that's also assuming that you don't have ad blocks and Brave Shield up, so that may actually not be accurate. But generally speaking, though, compared to Firefox or Safari, you may see, generally speaking, more compatibility with like certain websites that are very picky on what browser you have. Um, Firefox, on the other hand, is very simple, very clean, very minimalistic, which I like better than Brave. However, by default, it isn't as private as you would have liked. That's why it will require some modification. And that's why I heavily recommend that you read through our website and try to modify it yourself. And usually we tend to discourage you to look at forks that do it for you, such as LibreWolf or WaterFox. But again, it's up to you. I don't think it's the end of the world that you use these two browsers. And as for Safari, it's probably by default very easy, especially if you're a Mac user. Um, but yeah, there isn't like a perfect private browser out there. What is though it does exist, however, would be like what is best for usage scenarios. So if you like watching Netflix a lot, maybe use Brave to have access to 1080p. Um, if you have an Apple device and you're used to the Safari ecosystem, maybe use Safari, but consider using some of our other like recommendations once like you test it out and get used to it yourself. Um, Once again, like browsers are usually like the first step you take on the browser journey besides taking doing a password manager. And honestly, as long as like you make a choice that makes you the most comfortable, it's a victory for all of us. So please, like by all means, like explore your options. Don't think about what's perfect or not. Focus on what works for you the most. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, Jordan, I also want to quickly answer some of their later questions. Have you used privacy tests before? I haven't like used it personally myself, so I'm not think I can answer that question.
Yeah, so I guess I do have a little bit of experience with privacytest.org. I think it's worth mentioning, like, off the bat, that website is developed by someone that does work for Brave. They create their own browser, which does have, anti-fingerprinting protections and sort of things. So we kind of talked about it a bit this week, but when there's money changing hands, when there's people affiliated with other companies, there's the possibility for things to not be as, I don't know, there's a possibility for the data to not be as displayed as it should, or, not to say that this website isn't correct or not, but I think it's worth, when you go into this, I think it's worth noting that it is developed by someone who does work at Brave. But I think it's okay. It's an okay resource to be able to see, what sort of protections do different browsers offer. But I definitely would, like we talked about a bit earlier, I think it's important to, like, think about a lot of different resources when we talk about, like, getting different things from different places. And it looks like on privacy tests, Molvad is kind of on top on that chart, but Brave also does quite well. I think it's a decent idea to have a look at it at least once, but I think it's definitely trickier to analyze how this information would work in reality, because this is all on default settings. So Firefox on default settings is kind of crappy, I think, and it does look like they are a little bit behind on updating things on this website. They've only got 141 Firefox, which is a couple of versions old now. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's a decent resource. But I think you should, like we said, consult multiple different ones, because there are issues with this one. And I think namely the main thing is like the default settings on this. It's like it's good, I guess, but once you start changing settings, it does start to affect things quite dramatically.
Hmm. Yeah, indeed. Once again, don't rely on one single source for our information. Project Test does a great job, of course, compiling everything, but as Jordan mentioned, they're quite out of date. So keep that in mind before you make a decision, of course. Definitely talk to people in the forum if you want a more up to date and new information about browsers nowadays. As of recently, of course, Firefox is getting a lot better at fingerprint protection, so you may want to use that instead. Who knows? And yeah, let's move on to our question about profiles, containers, and per container VPNs. I just want to answer a misconception that you have first. Firstly, iCloud Plus has something called per container relays, and I think that's what you're referring to when you're talking about like per container VPNs. I'd say, and for starters, like per container VPNs or per tab VPN, whatever you want to describe it, uh, it's it's an interesting feature, of course, and maybe for your threat model, it could work for you. Maybe you really want your work profile to connect to a work VPN, for example, that's directly connected to you know one server, but you want your personal VPN to connect to another server so you can watch Netflix in a certain region. And it is interesting, but I we usually tend to recommend more general like variations of this like model where it's either routes through the entire device through the VPN or your entire router through the VPN, meaning that individual devices you have in your house can be connected to that same VPN. So if you're interested in perhaps like separating different apps um, through like different like VPN servers, may explore concepts such as split tunneling, which is a feature offered by a lot of these providers out there, which allows you to essentially connect to different servers depending on the app that you use. So you just add different apps to a certain server and it'll connect only through that app, or who knows, maybe some apps won't even connect to a server in the first place. um, so that might work better for you. Per container workflows, it's interesting. um, I haven't seen a lot of positive mention on that on the forum, or honestly any mention of it. So if you do have like a strong argument for why this could be a potential model, please like let us know. But personally, it is not a particularly a very a regular uh, form of VPN usage that I've noticed, at least from my time, like just like talking to folks. Um, Also, like I want to emphasize that using a dedicated VPN provider is better than using like iCal Plus's private relay, and it does not uh, really compare. Honestly, like you should be using a separate VPN service for that. Um, and I wouldn't really recommend Safari unless like you have some current like ease accessibility issues and you must use it on your Mac, for example. By all means, use it then. But generally speaking, you have the option. Try to use like a separate VPN service on something like Firefox, Brave, or Molvad, and try to enable split tunneling instead. And maybe switch it as you switch to a different profile. Maybe it's a little inconvenient at first, but it's better than using a browser only VPN. Like I don't know, like Jordan, do you have any experience with like having VPNs to different containers? Is that like normal?
So depending on like your operating system, you can on basically on I guess Android, each profile uses a separate VPN, and also you can use a different VPN in a private space as well. So
Hmm.
it depends.
Oh, I think they meant by the browser, like
Yeah,
not right.
yeah, they do. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay, yeah.
so that's sort of a way that it could work on like a device level, but like in the browser, as far as I know, the only option that is available for that is Mozilla VPN, which is on Firefox, which basically, yeah, has the ability to use a
Oh,
different IP connection per like profile, per like
oh, okay.
container, which is quite useful, I think. And it's powered by Molvad VPN, so you know, trusted people in the space. Not really too sure about like a lot of the technical aspects of it, but I think it's certainly an option if you really need that ability to have different containers in your browser, for example. But yeah, when it comes to like your operating system, I think like all I can think of is like Android. You can kind of do that, and don't know how you would do that on Windows or Mac OS. I guess like how Kevin said, you can do split tunneling, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think there's I can't think of too many other ways you could silo things.
Yeah, like maybe like have different browsers and then maybe using split tunneling, like have like a dedicated work browser potentially. Because I'm assuming that you're a Mac OS user who like this person here, um, who have access to both like Safari and Firefox, and maybe using like a browser VPN, like you mentioned. So I guess there isn't really like a recommended like configuration how to do this, but if you feel like it works for you, go ahead. It's just that at least from like our knowledge though, like it may be better just like either have a whole device be like routed through a certain VPN to prevent data leaks, or potentially just use a dedicated work browser, just so like it and use split tunneling with that, so maybe like more safe, I would say. Like I said, there isn't really a lot of like research done on how different VPNs on containers work. So I don't really know much about it. And that's something I do personally. But I feel like if it works for you, feel free to use it, of course. And it really depends on your threat model, of course. Like, do you care a lot about data leaks? Yes or no? Do you really need these profiles separate because your work profile needs to actually be separated from everything else? Then I do see like a genuine reason why you may want to use like a per container VPN. So
Yeah.
we don't really have enough information to really help you specifically whether that's a good or not. But what we can say is that it's plausible, it works. Definitely consider getting a separate browser though, just to make things easier, per se. And that way you can use like something like a Molvad or Proton VPN for your entire device and just use split tunneling. That way it's a little more like easy on you per se. But yes, per container VPNs do work. And there isn't anything too bad about it, I'd say, depending on their model.
I did have another thought though, like after thinking about this for a second, there
Mm.
is the ability to use like a VPN extension, which basically, I think if you use like Molvad in the browser, like if you use the Molvad extension, it allows you to basically choose a different endpoint in your browser specifically. So that could be a decent option. Like you could have Molvad VPN, and then you could have your browser, and you could have the Molvad extension, and then the Molvad extension can change the exit IP to maybe you need to access a website in your country and you usually use an external country's VPN server. That could be a useful option for you as well. But yeah, I think we've kind of feel like that's most of the ways you could do things. Kind of complex, I guess.
Yeah. I guess like my concern is what if you have an on device VPN and then you have different containers and profiles with different like browser extensions with, different VPN server connections. Like, do you think that'll cause performance issues?
I guess it depends on your system. I can't say I've ever tried something like that, so I can't really comment on whether there are performance issues, but I think it's depends on your system, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the user responded back. Thanks for the answer, guys. Lots to think about, and thank you. I hope that was definitely a lot of information we gave out in the past like few minutes. So please let us know. Feel free to follow up if you have any other questions. Think it through. We're more than happy to help you with your privacy journey. And who knows, maybe like we're really excited to see if whether or not your family members do end up adopting these browsers.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the forum thread or in the YouTube chat. So I guess let's put out a final call here. If you have any questions, leave it in the YouTube chat, leave it in the forum thread, and we can try and get to that in the last couple of minutes here. But we are moving towards the end of the stream here, closing in on the 2-hour mark, which is getting a little long. So I think we should definitely try and close up a little bit here.
Yeah, I feel like this is actually pretty good as our past live streams usually go on almost up to 7, sometimes a little over 7. So I think it was a good timing, honestly. An hour and 30 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not bad. It's not bad.
definitely not bad. So I guess just to kind of roll towards the outro here, all the updates from this week in privacy will be shared on our blog every week. So you can subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. And for people who prefer audio, we also have a podcast version which will go live a couple of hours after the live stream, which will be slightly more edited and easier to listen to on an audio format. And of course, that's available on all types of podcast apps, and you can also find that on our website. And if you want to make sure that you get basically the whole list of updates and the newsletter, you can use your email to basically subscribe to that, and you'll get updates straight to your inbox. We try to put in quite a lot of effort to keeping you updated on things. So, if you subscribe to that, you can get the updates straight to your inbox, and we won't spam you with anything or anything like that. It'll just be the updates, and that'll be great if you miss a live stream, or if you want to keep up to date on privacy news, then that probably is a great idea to check that out. And with that being said, I guess this live stream will also be ported over onto PeerTube afterwards. So, if you don't like watching on YouTube and you don't want to support Google, you can also watch this on neat.tube, and you can also find that on our website. But I'm not seeing any questions here. Kevin, have you seen any extra things we should cover before we end out the show here?
Oh, one question is now by Frost Voxel. I saw there was 40% off membership. Is there a date when that ends? Um, let me check the website actually, because I am not aware of like whether there was a change or not.
I think that's
Uh,
definitely a Jonah question. I don't know if Jonah's still here, and he might be able to answer that for you. But I think we were planning on hopefully having it going for a little bit longer. But I think we'll need to get some confirmation on that, because it's not information that I'm personally privy to.
yeah, I'm just usually there's like a ribbon that appears like when you click on the website, and it usually says 40% off, but I don't see it because right now we're doing a live stream and the ribbon's been updated to encourage folks to join a live stream right now. So maybe I'm not sure. Let me try to click on this. Oh, I'm not sure. It's fine. But just letting you know that hopefully you'll be able to like subscribe and become a member, regardless of like whether that promotion is still on or not. We will definitely let you know whether or not that promotion is, because right now both of us don't really know, besides Jonah. But if you're like interested in subscribing, like, and to our newsletter, regardless, please do so, and that is free.
Yeah, the newsletter is always going to be free, always sent to your inbox. But I guess this is kind of a good segue into like a pivot towards, we do have members. Okay, so Jonah just responded. There's a limited time, no set end date at this time though. So there you
So
go.
it's still ongoing.
So I would say there's not a huge rush. So think about it. Definitely, if you like what we're doing, you want to get early access to some videos we're putting out. We have a lot more planned for next year that you'll get access to. And just remember, like, if you subscribe now, that price gets locked in forever, $6 a month instead of 10. And you get that nice feeling of supporting independent media. We're putting out all sorts of stuff, like she works on the articles on our website. We've got Kevin, who's working on the news sections on the website, and of course the video content here on YouTube as well. So your support is greatly appreciated, and I guess I can move us into the next thing here. If you do want to support us, you can go to privacyguides.org and you can visit the red heart icon in the top right hand corner of the website. And by clicking that, you'll be able to choose to either become a member, which, like I said, you can get access to early videos and there'll be more perks coming next year, and also make a one-time donation. And of course, you can always use privacy respecting methods to do that. You can use Monero or a credit card or any other cryptocurrency that you prefer. And that is greatly appreciated if you do consider doing that. It supports the work we're doing. So if you are considering donating or becoming a member, getting some perks as well, definitely check it out at privacyguides.org. And with that being said, I feel like that's kind of a wrap this week. I think we are done here. So I guess we'll see you next week, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.